All right, welcome back. We are going to continue animating the W, shading, and lighting. So there'll be a project file where you can start exactly where I am if you haven't been following along or something happened. You never know. So what I'm going to do here is go back to the Geometry Nodes workspace, and what you'll do is if you can't find it, just click on the original piece, and it will show up. All right, so right here on the W, we need to animate the W. So we learned in the looping everything lesson how to make a seamless loop out of the W. So let's go ahead and duplicate our noise texture. Shift A, we're going to get in a mix color, plug it here, and then get our factor and plug it into B. And now we have this. Let's bring our timeline up a little bit. Let's bring our factor to the left. Let's go down here, hit our arrow back to frame 0, and I'm using right here 250 frames. So right here on the W, I'm going to hit I, and then here on the factor, hit I. We're going to go to the end, and we're going to type in 20, hit I, and then bring that factor over here, hit I, and then right over here, that on the W, and then we're going to go back and then back to frame 0 and type in -20. And that is going to make a seamless loop for us. Now, one thing I want to do just stylistically is go here on one of these instance on points and just scale these cubes to be almost touching. I want them to be nice and flat, and since we did that, we can have these guys a little smaller. So that looks a little bit better. It's going to make things look a little easier to read. And you can also say, bring these guys just up a little bit. There we go. Now we have a cool looking scene going on. And now we can go into the shading portion of this tutorial. So because this particle here is the only object we're seeing, that is the particle, that is the thing that's going to house our material. Now usually, and you'll find this out later on in the course, we would use a set position node, a set material node, but in this case, because we're only seeing that, we'll put the material on this particle. So let's go here to the shading tab. I'm gonna hit 0 to go to frame view, to camera view, and I'm gonna go and delete these two. And then I'm gonna go here on the particle, I'm gonna click on the particle, click new, and then slide metallic over, and you can say, okay, it's working, we can see it. So let's go ahead and learn a little bit. This should be our first little shading lesson. We're going to learn a little bit about how things work, specifically how materials work in context to geometry nodes. So we have our metallic, and we're going to bring that color down to a little bit of a dark. And then let's go and get in a bump node. We're going to click on bump, and if you ever want scratches, dents, dots, whatever, this bump node is the gatekeeper to allowing that to happen. So we'll plug that into normal. Then we're going to get our Voronoi node. And with that node wrangler add-on enabled, we're going to hit Control T, and we're going to use the object coordinate because that is sort of our default, and we're going to plug in our distance. Now there is a difference between the distance and the color here, and let's learn those two distinctions. But first, why does this look so ugly? Well, that's because this bump node needs to be fixed a little bit. So rule of thumb, when doing these sort of surface imperfection, these dents, these bumps, distance should be at 0.1. That kind of fixed it, but strength is still too high. Bring that strength down, and now it looks a lot better. So let's learn the difference between these two here. So I'm going to go ahead and first get our color ramp so that we can actually control everything that's going on here. Now don't follow along here, just kind of watch. I'm going to hit Control Shift click. And see these gradients? Remember in the first part of this video? Remember in the first part of this lesson, the gradient showed the slope of how high and low the extrusion, the displacement is going to be. That is the same exact thing that's happening here. See how one looks high and one looks lower? That's the same thing, but in this case, we're faking a displacement because it's a bump. The bump is a fake displacement so that when it's small, we don't need to add extra faces for displacement. We can fake it. But the difference here is now if we use color, we're getting hard color. not soft color, no gradients. And so if we go here, you can see it's not really displacing it. It is a little bit, but barely, right? But if we use distance, it's really trying to displace, really trying to behave like it's being displaced. And the reason why we picked this Voronoi is because I want these little circular dots on the top of our object to add some interest. So we're going to go from random from 1 to 0. Random is Voronoi. Now we have a grid. And then you can use your color ramp to bring it in to get these guys. So what I'm going to do is bring it in till we just get about 3 by 3 on the dots. And you'll notice they're also on the side here. So if we go to our particle object, I'm gonna hit the period key to go to my particle object. He's all over it, right? And that's because this is a 3D texture. It's able to see and apply the material in a 3-dimension way. I'm gonna go ahead and shade smooth. So what you can do is, I just want it on the top. That's all I want. So we'll go from 3D to 2D, and it's only going to be able to map a texture basically on the tops of things, right? It's not going to recognize that there is a side. So as you can see, it's like, I hope that noise wasn't extremely annoying. So you can see how it's just stretching it on the side, and that's because it's not recognizing that there is a side to apply more things to. And that's I'm doing that by choice, but you can scale it and skip that. And then you can use your color ramp to specify how big you want these things to be. So, and now it is on the bottom because it's 2D. I don't care because we're not going to see that. I'm gonna go hit 0 and go back to my camera view. So now we have dots on the top of our object, which gives a little bit of texture, a little bit of feel, and that is what I want. Now let's go and add some roughness to our object here, right? This is where you can do it, but I want to make it look cool. So what I'm gonna do is get in a color ramp and plug it into the roughness. And I'm about to show you guys a big problem we're about to experience. So in OI, I'm gonna use a noise texture. And then for this, in this case, I'm just gonna get a new mapping setup to demonstrate the problem we're about to experience. So we're going to use the object coordinate. We're going to plug the noise texture into the color ramp. And we'll get to the problem in just a second. Let's explain what's going on here. You can now see there's some roughness fun happening here. So you can see, look at that. Looks kind of cool. The roughness is playing around with our light. I'm going to click on the particle here in the outliner. So if you crunch it in, you're going to get more gloss. If you crunch it in, you're going to get more rough. And so the white portion represents very rough portions, and the black portion represents, very glossy mirror-like looking stuff. So what I want to do is bring the black portion up to be, less reflective, but I also want to bring the white portion down to be not so rough, not so aggressively rough. And then we can bring our detail to 12. Now notice something. I'm going to bring my scale up to make it more obvious. See that? See that shape there? It's on all of them. Same exact shape on all of my objects. And you can see they're all doing the same exact thing. And that's because Blender knows there's only one object here technically, but it's being duplicated a bunch. But it's not really applying the roughness onto this whole thing like it's its own solid object. That would be preferable. How do we do that? Well, we'll click back on the particle here in the outliner, and we have this mapping node, this texture coordinate node saying, use the object. Well, let's go ahead and instead of using that object, let's get this eyedropper tool and select the whole thing, right? And now it is going to map our texture across the entire thing, right? Isn't that cool? That's what we want, right? So I'm gonna show you why we don't want that. And I'm going to exaggerate this texture really quickly to demonstrate. If I press play on my animation, I'm going to go back here to layout to show you what's happening. If I press play on this animation, I want you to pay attention to the roughness, and watch, we're about to be to the end of the frame, end of the animation here. See how something changed? We're going to go back, watch. Something changed. You can very well see the loop isn't seamless anymore. So if I go back to frame 0, let's just watch this section of roughness. If I go to the very end, it changed. So let's go back to frame 0. It changed. That's because it's not recognizing that it's going to stop, here. It's changing it across this entire thing. And again, the number one rule of loops is the beginning and the end have to be exactly the same. So in this example, we're not going to be allowed to apply the roughness across the entire thing like we want to, which is a huge bummer. I cannot find a workaround for it. So in this case, we're actually just going to have to add the roughness to the objects to where it's not obvious that roughness is being duplicated a bunch. So we'll go back to we need to go back to shading and then click on the particle. And so in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and delete the mapping, and then we'll just reuse this mapping here and plug it right into the vector. And then now what we can do is just bring our detail to 12, it already is, and bring the roughness all the way here. The black needs to be brought up a little bit, and it's pretty good. So now we still have something interesting going on with the roughness, but it's not obvious immediately that it's being duplicated a bunch, and especially because the animation is moving, it's not even going to be looked for. So we can kind of get around it like that. Now let's go ahead and make it so that, I guess we'll go back to the beginning here. I should probably get a timeline down here on my shader, so we'll get a new timeline here in the shader menu. I want to make it look like these objects here in the bottom, when they hit the floor, they start to glow red, like the floor is really, really hot. So that sounds like it would be a proximity thing, but it's a gradient. We're going to make it easier on ourselves. We're not going to do any proximity craziness. And so what we need to do is open up the emission. We're going to do a strength of like 5, and whoop, that's bright. Now we have our render engine set to cycles. We're going to go to Eevee. Make sure you turn on your bloom and your screen space reflections here and your motion blur so that it looks the same as mine. So what we're going to do is go ahead and get in a color ramp so we can control the texture we're about to put on it and control the color in this case. So we can plug that into here, and you can make this guy nice and orange. Now we're going to go ahead and get a gradient, and the gradient texture is going to look like it's a proximity thing. So plug that here, and we need to get a new mapping and texture coordinate system so that we can edit this. So I'm going to hit Control T and use the object. So now you can see our gradient. You can edit it here on the Y. So we're going to give it -90. But what I want, this is not what I want. I want the whole thing on the ground to work, right? It's just being applied the same as the roughness as this one object up here on everything. The exception to the rule where we use the object coordinate. So let's just go ahead, use the object coordinate on this guy, and then you can use the X-axis to bring it up. The exception to the rule is on 2D materials. Because the gradient is 2D, it's going to be the same everywhere, right? So when we get to the end of the animation, the gradient is always going to be in the same place. So this is an exception to that rule. Because we know the gradient is going to stay the same no matter what, it's not going to break our animation, and it's actually going to do what we want it to do, which is when the cubes are on the bottom, make them glow. And then you can go ahead and exaggerate it there, exaggerate it here, and then you can play with that. So make it come down here. There we go. So now when the objects are on the ground, they are going to glow up. And then when they come to the top, they're going to stop glowing, which looks really, really awesome. And we love, or at least I love, glow. Now, little color management thing. This is kind of a sidebar, not really important to the course. See how it's supposed to be a vibrant orange, but it's like a pale orange. That's because we're working in an AGX color space. Full transparency, I have not gotten around to really learning about AGX and the value of it outside of it is really great for these emissive, like it's great for realism, right? So this would be real. But in my case, I want to exaggerate it because we're making art here. We're not making a realistic environment. So in my case, I want to actually go from AGX back to the standard filmic that we used to use. And now it's going to be a little more vibrant. And that's what I want to go for here. We're really just kind of being artistic. So I am not married to, oh, does it look real? So if we go to the regular standard view here, we get something that looks really, really awesome. I'm gonna play with my color, right? So if we go from Filmic to AGX, that's how it's going to look, but in the same exact color, looks like this in Filmic. So this is one of those cases where you just kind of take your pick what color space you would like to use. I use AGX quite a bit, but in the cases like this, I flip back over to Filmic. So now we're here. We can start lighting our scene. So we're going to go back here, and then I'm going to go to the official render view. I'm going to go here to the world, and I'm going to go here from color down to black. And now we have this, which means, okay, well, we need some lighting. We need some lights to hit the tops of this here. So what I'm going to do is go here to the lights, get a spotlight, and then I'm going to hit G, move them up, and then move them out over here. So in this case, what I want is some lights to kind of scatter across. So I want to have this kind of cross-section scatter. Sometimes I would have maybe a point light to shoot in here, but in this case, I want to use an area light, a point light to kind of just shoot everywhere. And that's how the point light is going to behave. So in my case, I'm going to give it a power of 1,000, and there we go. We're already getting some light. And what I want to do is give it a slight blue, like I always do in my tutorials, and then 5,000 maybe. Cool. Now he's getting really bright. Now he's sitting over here. What I like to do is bring my radius up. So you can see the light. If you bring the radius up, you'll start to see that circle get bigger. That's what I want. This is something that I'm going for. It smooths it out, flattens it out. Lighting is kind of ugly right now. What I want to do now is introduce a little bit of volume to the scene to help with our lighting, help with the overall feel of this scene. So we're going to go here to the world, click on volume, and right here where it says none, we're going to go to principled volume. And then here on the density, we're going to bring it down, just going to introduce a little bit of volume so that, because the volume is going to greatly affect our lighting. So now we're here. What I want to do now is take this guy and I want to put one way over here, right? So I'm going to hit Shift D, bring it over, bring it over. So now he is going to scatter like that. So now we have these whole things going on. What I want to do is click on my camera, click on my transform settings. I want to bring him up and I'll make him look down. I'm remembering my original design here. And so now we have some pretty sweet lighting going on. Maybe this guy can be a little smaller on the radius. So bring our radius down. He can be a little bit more pinpoint. And then I'm going to go back here to the camera view, camera settings. On the color management, see how it's kind of faded and just kind of washed out? You can go from look to high contrast and it's going to fix that. And so in this case, what I'm going to do is take my point lights and I'm going to go and just brighten them up. Maybe like, was that 5,000? We'll do 7,000. And maybe on the second one as well, maybe get 7,000. So now we have some pretty nice lighting. Actually, maybe 3,000. We have a bit of a contrast going on, but you can do anything you'd like to do here, and then maybe even bring up the gamma, bring up the contrast of everything that's happening here. So this part is completely up to you. How do you want this to look? And then now we can just kind of fine tune and polish this. So like, hey, I want these smaller cubes. I want them to come up a little bit. So we'll go here to geometry nodes. We'll go here to the render view. I'm going to click on this object to reveal it, which would be that first one. Click it so you can see the geometry nodes. And then I think it's, yeah, the one with the transform geometry. So we'll bring it up, right, to make it look cool. We can go back to layout. Maybe make our point light even brighter, like 10,000. And then maybe he needs to come up a little bit. I don't know. Maybe he needs to be bigger. So bring that radius even higher. Smooth that light out a little bit. There's a lot of different things we can do. Possibly the volume needs to be less dense. Maybe I need to be less dense. There's a lot of things that we can do. And then maybe, hey, this material, so we'll click on the particle here, and then we'll go here to the material section, right here on strength, maybe bring that brightness up. All this stuff is completely up to you. But we're done. We are done with this scene, except for one important thing I forgot to mention. And I just saw it, that's why I remembered it. So if I bring my camera here, look at that. The lights don't follow. Again, that is going to break our loop. So if we go here, right? Boom, loop broken, broke the loop. So we'll go back to frame 0. What I'll do, I'm gonna click on each point light. I'm hold down Control, click on point, and then click on our camera last, Control P, object. And so now, if we go to the end of the animation here, the lights are parented, right? So the lights are literally connected to our camera so that wherever the camera goes, the light goes, again, keeping everything looping nice and seamlessly. If you want to have some fun with it, you can go ahead and click on depth of field, bring some depth of field into this animation like this, maybe, to kind of, keep the viewer's eyes in whatever place you want them to be. But now we're all done. We're going to go ahead and click the render image just to see how this would look as a final piece. Now we're introducing a little bit of motion blur, and this piece is and looks awesome. And there's still more room to tweak things. You can still add some more things to make it look awesome. So let me show you how to export this out. So there we go. Go ahead and save your project file. I'm going to go ahead and save mine, and we are done with this whole lesson. I mean, this looks really nice right here, but everything is done, ready to go. We're all good. Hopefully you learned some stuff. This is the end of this first Geometry Nodes project. We built out this whole thing. There's a lot to apply to other ideas. But yeah, that's the end of this lesson.